Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, a quick gentle reminder. Byjus Exam Prep IAS has already launched its official Telegram channel. If you have not yet joined the channel, please do join so that you get all the current affairs related updates. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Making Sense of US Midterm Polls. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. This article can be looked at from two dimensions. One is from the polity dimension, the other is from the international relations dimension. How can we link this to polity? This is where we have to understand what are the major differences between India and United States of America's polity. First, let us take a look at differences between India and United States of America. First, what we have is the separation of powers. What is the separation of powers? We have the legislature, we have the executive and the judiciary. Let's keep aside the judiciary. Let's focus on the legislature and the executive. When it comes to United States of America, we have clear-cut separation of powers. When it comes to legislature, they make the laws. When it comes to executive, they implement the laws. And when it comes to judiciary, they interpret the laws. Is it same for India? No. We have something called as the overlapping jurisdiction between the legislature and the executive. The legislature get elected, and from the legislature, they go on to become the executive as well. But in United States of America, there is clear-cut separation of powers. Joe Biden, who is now the president of United States of America, will nowhere be linked to the making of the laws. Why? Because that is the role that is given to the Congress. So the legislative body happens to be the Congress. It makes the laws. Then they have the executive, that is Joe Biden's administration, which will implement the laws. This is the first major difference. The second major difference is in terms of the president. When we speak about president of United States of America, how many years he is elected as the president of United States of America? It is 4 years. But when it comes to India, it is 5 years. Third, what we have to look at is in terms of the parliament. When we speak about parliament, what do we have? We have the upper house, which happens to be the Rajya Sabha. Then we also have the lower house, which happens to be the Lok Sabha. What is the equivalent in United States of America? The upper house happens to be the Senate, which happens to be similar to that of the Rajya Sabha. So in India, what we have is the Rajya Sabha. When it comes to United States of America, what they have is the Senate. When it comes to Lok Sabha in India, a similar equivalent is what is called as the House of the Representatives. So the House of Representatives and Senate together is what is called as the Congress. So it is the Congress which acts as the legislative body in United States of America. Another key difference, when it comes to the Rajya Sabha in India, how is it divided? It is divided on the basis of population once again. Let's say, for example, if you consider Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh has the maximum number of seats in Rajya Sabha, and let's say, for example, any other small state, it will have very minuscule number. So again, in the Rajya Sabha, it is on the basis of population in India. But when it comes to the Senate in United States of America, every state has 2 seats, which means to say it is not on the basis of population, but it is fixed for all the states. So in India, it is on the basis of population once again, where seats are allotted to the Rajya Sabha, that is to the states. And when it comes to the Senate, it is always fixed, and every state will have 2 seats. This is another major difference between United States of America and India. Now, what we have to look at is another difference between the Lok Sabha and the House of the Representatives. When it comes to the Lok Sabha, generally they are elected for about 5 years. But when it comes to the House of Representatives, they are elected for 2 years. So every 2 years, what they will have is the elections. In Senate, what they are elected is for about 6 years. In Congress, that is in the House of Representatives, they are elected for 2 years. So every 2 years, that is the House of Representatives will go for the elections, and in the Senate, since they are elected for about 6 years, 1/3 of the member are re-elected, or they also have elections every 2 years. So 1/3 of the people get elected after 2 years. Why are we discussing all this? That is because you have to understand the meaning of the midterm polls. What is this midterm polls? Basically, the elections happens for the legislature. One is for the Senate, The other is for the House of the Representatives. The House of the Representatives will go for elections every 2 years. If this election happens when the president is in the mid of his term, right now we have the Joe Biden administration, he has fulfilled almost 2 years of his term. So whenever the elections for the legislature happens, that is for the Congress and the Senate, when the president is serving and he is in his midterm, that elections for the legislature is what is called as the midterm polls. Right now we have the executive in United States of America led by the president. The president has almost fulfilled 2 years of his term out of 4 years. So when the legislative elections happen during this period after fulfillment of 2 years of the president, that is what is called as the midterm polls. So the members of the House of the Representatives, so 2 years term, and are considered for election every 2 years. And then we have the senators who serve 6 year term, and elections to the Senate happens every 2 years, where 1/3 of the people get elected. When we look at the House of the Representatives, there are as many as 435 seats. When we speak about these 435 seats, every 2 years the election takes place for this 435 seats. Then when it comes to the Senate, as I discussed, there are about 100 seats. Every state will have about 2 seats. So 1/3 of it, that is about 35 seats, will have to be elected every 2 years. The US midterm polls happened on November 8th. Before this elections could take place, what we had is the Democratic Party. So we have two parties. One happens to be Republican, the other happens to be the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party had the majority. But now, after the elections have taken place, the Democrats have majority in the Senate, and it is the Republicans who have the majority in the House of the Representatives. Prior to the elections on November 8th, it was Democrats who had majority both in the House of the Representatives as well as in the Senate. Right now, it is in the Senate that they have the majority, but in the House of the Representatives, it is the Republicans who have the majority. Before the elections, what were the issues that were in picture? Before the elections, there were multiple issues that were in picture. So they had to fight the elections. So what were the concentrative or the epicenter of these elections? One was with respect to the abortion laws. Second was in terms of the immigration. Third was in terms of crime rate that is prevalent in United States of America. Fourth is in terms of the inflation, and fifth is in terms of overall US economy. So both the political parties had to fight these elections for the Congress on terms of all these aspects. When you look at inflation in United States of America, it is at 8.2% in September 2022. And this happens to be one of the worst inflations that United States of America is suffering, and they are almost in the verge of recession. So this means the issues that they fought on included inflation, GDP, abortion, immigration, so on and so forth. This meant that all these issues became the focal point of the elections, and ultimately people have decided, and now House of Representatives is under the control of the Republicans and the Senate is under the control of the Democrats. Now, what is the major issue? This is where international relations comes into picture. Before the elections, you had the power which was consolidated by the Democrats, both in the House of the Representatives as well as in the Senate. But right now, the power is split. So in the House of the Representatives, what we have is the majority of the Republicans, but in the Senate, what we have is the Democrats who have the power. So whenever decisions have to be taken, it is not that easy. Why? That is because, as I initially told you, if there is same political party which is in executive and also in the legislature, they would be able to make the laws, and these laws will be implemented by the executive. But now the legislature, that is the House of the Representative, one of the houses, is where the Republicans are present. So they may come up with a different law as well. These laws may not be acceptable for the president. When you have both the houses run by the same political party, the president will make a request to the Congress, and the Congress will come up with a law. They will be able to make sure that this particular law is implemented. But now the House of the Representatives are being led by the Republicans, so number of laws may be dismissed, or they may come up with a new law, and the execution may not be right as well. Let me give you some of the examples. Let's say, for example, we have the President Joe Biden, who was always clear cut about the climate change. He wanted to come up with laws, and he also wanted to pump in a lot of money when it comes to the health in United States of America. So he did come up with number of executive action plans as well. This was always supported by laws that were drafted by the Congress. But now the Congress, one of the houses, is being filled by the representatives. So the representatives will come up with their own laws, and the execution may not be that easy when it comes to the health as well as on the climate change. So passing of laws will now be under the control of the Republicans, and execution may not be easy because power now is under the control of the Republicans in one of the houses. This is on the internal front. Let's say, for example, on the external front, we have the Joe Biden administration who were supporting Ukraine. Now, what if the Republicans are not happy supporting Ukraine? What if they come up with a law where they actually say that United States of America should not be supporting Ukraine? They will support Ukraine, but the thing is, the amount of funding or the amount of money or the grants that is provided from United States of America to Ukraine may also drop as well. So considerable impact may be felt on the Ukraine front. This is what may happen at the international level, external front. How will it impact India? India is always been comfortable both with the Democrats as well as Republicans. No matter who controls the Congress or the presidency in United States of America, India and America's relationship won't have much of impact. But when you consider the visa issues, what are visa issues? Let's say, for example, people are wanting to travel from India to United States of America, either for work, either for education, or even tourist visas as well. When it comes to the Republicans, they are kind of conservatives. They are against immigration. They do not want people to travel to their country. So one of the areas where we may face the issue is in terms of the visas. So the impact on India would be in terms of visas as well. So earlier you had the Democratic Party, they were all okay with immigration, they were welcoming, but now the House of Representatives will be controlled by the Republicans. So the Conservative Party may also come up with laws, and as a result there could be impediment to visas. One in terms of the work front, the second in terms of the availability of jobs, third in terms of student visas, and finally even for the tourist visas as well. One of the other internal factor which can also impact both United States of America as well as external sector is in terms of the businesses. How will it impact the businesses? United States of America under Joe Biden administration wanted to impose high tariffs or taxes on the corporate bodies. These corporate bodies were not happy with it, and now since the House of Representatives is taken over by the Republicans, this imposition of the tax may not happen. This is what we have to understand with respect to this article. So what we have learned is the constitutional angle, the polity angle. What we have also learned is the international relations angle with respect to the US midterm polls. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, what is India's future strategy on emissions? Let us try and understand what is this article all about. Before we look deep into this article, let me give you a gentle reminder. We already have recorded about the COP27 in our recent explain session. If you have not yet watched this session, please do watch so that you understand some of the basic terms with respect to COP. What is this net emissions? What is this carbon neutrality? So on and so forth. What have been discussed as part of COP27? Everything has been explained as part of this session. So please do watch and then come back to this video. Let us discuss what this article is speaking about. There are two terms that we have to understand. One is what is called as net zero. The other is what is called as the carbon neutrality. What is this net zero all about? First, we will understand what is the meaning of carbon neutral. When we speak about carbon neutrality, what exactly happens? Let's say, for example, there is an industry. Whatever is the emissions that this particular industry does with respect to the carbon, the same amount is also neutralized as well, which means to say, if there is emission of about 5 units of carbon, 5 units of carbon are also neutralized. So there is zero carbon emissions that is happening, which is called as carbon neutrality. Then there is another term called as net zero. It also implies the same thing, but at the same time, it also includes other greenhouse gases as well. So when we speak speak about carbon neutrality in general, it is having an emphasis on carbon dioxide, but when it comes to the net zero, it also includes other greenhouse gases, let's say for example methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, so on and so forth. So carbon neutrality is about making sure that as much as the carbon dioxide emissions happen, the same amount is neutralized, so there is no carbon emissions as a whole, so there is net zero. And at the same time, when we speak about net zero as a whole, it includes carbon dioxide along with other greenhouse gases like methane, nitrous oxide and other hydrofluorocarbons. What has India committed as part of the carbon neutrality? The Paris Agreement of 2015 required countries to submit a plan demonstrating how they would switch their economies from being reliant on fossil fuel to clean energy sources. This was to include measures to be taken to keep temperatures from rising beyond 2 degrees centigrade and preferably keeping at 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of the century and becoming carbon neutral or achieving net zero. India has committed to being a net zero by the year 2070. As part of this initiative, what India has come up with is called as the long-term low emission development strategy. So this article here is primarily focusing on this long-term low emission developmental strategy. What is the strategy all about? The focus will be on utilization of the natural resources with regard to the energy security. What we will be making is a transition from the fossil fuels to smooth, sustainable and inclusive energy security, for which the government has said that the National Hydrogen Mission launched in 2021 aims to make India a green hydrogen hub. The rapid expansion of green hydrogen production, increasing electrolyzer manufacturing capacity in the country, threefold increase in nuclear capacity by 2032 are some of the other milestones that are envisaged alongside overall development of the power sector. So basically, the focus is on the nuclear power, the focus is on the hydrogen sector, and to make sure that we have the carbon neutral economy, we will be supporting other avenues of generating the power. So as of now, we have the renewable energy sector, we have the non-renewable energy sector. As of now, we are making use of the thermal power. In addition to the thermal power, what we will constantly increase is the nuclear power, hydrogen and renewable energy sources like solar, wind, so on and so forth. That is one of the proposal made by India as part of the long-term low emission developmental strategy. Second, increased use of biofuels, especially ethanol blending in petrol. The drive to increase electric vehicle penetration and the increased use of green hydrogen fuel are expected to drive the low carbon development of the transport sector. India aspires to maximize the use of electric vehicles, ethanol blending to reach 20% by 2025, and a strong modal shift to public transport for passenger and freight as well. So what is the second objective? The second objective is that we will be shifting to the electric vehicles, and at the same time we will also make use of the public transport. As of now, the major impediment as to why people opt for their own vehicles is because the public transport, the source to the destination services are not that intact. Endpoint connectivity is not provided. So if we are able to provide so, the number of people switching to this mode of public transport will also increase. So the government is focusing on increasing the electric vehicle and at the same time making use of the public transport. While urbanization will continue as a strong trend from our current relatively low base, future sustainable and climate resilient urban development, what we will also focus is on the smart city initiatives, integrated planning of cities for mainstreaming adoption and energy and resource efficiency, effective green building codes, rapid developments in innovative solid and liquid waste management. We are here to move to urbanization. As much as 30% and more in the near future, more than 50% will also be urbanized as well. As and when we become urbanized, what we have to focus is on mitigating the impact of the waste. And at the same time, we need to have solutions to the urban problems as well. So developing smart city program, developing green building codes, and at the same time, finding solutions to the waste disposal will be taken up by India as part of long-term low emission development strategy. The focus will also be on improving energy efficiency by perform, achieve and trade scheme, national hydrogen mission, high level of electrification in all relevant process and activities, enhancing material efficiency, recycling leading to expansion of circular economy, exploring options for hard to abate sectors such as steel, cement, aluminium, and other sectors. What do we understand by this? Let's say, for example, when it comes to multiple industries, let's say we have aluminium industry, fertilizer industry, iron and steel industry. These industries emanate or give out a lot of carbon. This carbon is obviously harmful. So, as and when they emit this particular carbon, they have to reduce an equivalent amount of carbon as well. Thereby, they would be able to get the certificates from other firms who have exceeded reduction targets. So what they'll be able to do is swap. Let's say, for example, there is one industry. This industry has emitted about 5 units of carbon. There is another industry where the benchmark that is given for this particular industry is that they would be able to emit as much as 10 units of carbon. But this industry or this organization has only emitted 5 units of carbon. So it has saved about 5 units of carbon. So what it can do is pay this particular company and create a certificate for this company A. So this is what is called as the perform, achieve and trade scheme. Followed by this, India has a stronger record of enhancing forest and tree cover in the last 3 decades alongside high economic growth. India's forest fire incidence is well below global levels, while its forest and tree cover are a net sink, absorbing 15% of the CO2 emissions in 2016. India is also on track to fulfilling its nationally determined goals and commitments of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of additional carbon sequestration in forest and tree cover by 2030. So India is also focusing on increasing the forest cover, thereby mitigating the impact of carbon emissions. The transitions to the low carbon development pathway will entail several costs pertaining to the development of new technology, new infrastructure and other transaction costs. So India will also come up with its own share of new technologies so that it is able to bring an end to the carbon emissions. Is what is this long-term low emission developmental strategy? So in a brief, what India is looking at, it is planning to build climate resilience, it is planning to pursue low carbon strategies, it is also looking at significant development of the own country, and at the same time it is also wanting to contribute as much as possible to mitigate the impact of global warming. However, there are some sticky points or major obstacles when it comes to the global economy. What is it when it comes to the developed countries? The developed countries had promised that they would be providing funding or finances to the developing countries. This funding that they were supposed to have been provided is still not released. Of the nearly 100 billion that was committed back in the year 2009, only about one third of the money has come in. So they had promised that they would be giving as much as 100 billion, but only 33% of this has been given by the developed countries. Added to it, whenever they're giving the finances to another country, this has always come with some conditions as well. This should have been given in the form of grants, but this is given in the form of loans, and as a result, countries may have to return as well. And at the same time, it also has increasing burden on the developing countries where they have to bring large scale changes in their operations. And we also have another major issue, and that is to do with the loss and the damage as well. They should have created a dedicated fund for those countries which have already suffered, but then the developed countries are not even releasing the funds for those countries who have already had a major suffering because of the emissions and the climate change. These are some of the sticking points that the developed countries have with the developing countries. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Modi inaugurates Arunachal's first greenfield airport. We have the Prime Minister of India who inaugurated Doni Polo Airport, the first such greenfield facility in Arunachal Pradesh. So remember, Doni Polo Airport is in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Now the question is, what is this greenfield airport or the greenfield project to be in specific? Greenfield projects are those where the work is started from the scratch. So there is something called as the brownfield projects, where the brownfield projects basically include that the work has already started. There is certain level of development that is already seen on the existing developmental project. More progress is made, which is called as the brownfield project. But when it comes to the greenfield project, everything starts from the scratch. So everything goes from zero. But when it comes to the brownfield project, there is an existing structure. On the existing structure, much level advanced progress and development takes place. When it comes to the airport in India, the government of India has formulated a Greenfield Airport Policy 2008, which provides extant guidelines for the development of greenfield airports in the country. These guidelines basically put out some of the responsibilities both on the central government as well as on the state governments, and thus it promotes what is called as the cooperative federalism. So state governments should be selecting the sites. Let's say this particular airport will have to come in this region where it has to be constructed. All this will be taken up and decided by the state government. So they will identify the sites. They will also conduct the feasibility study of the construction for the airport, and ultimately this application is sent to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. The civil aviation will go through this particular report and ultimately take a conclusion whether this particular airport will have to be constructed in that region or not. So if the prescribed format is followed for the site clearance, then the approval would be given by the steering committee. What is the significance of the development of this project? As of now, this will have a 2300-meter runway. The report is suitable for all kinds of weather related operations. The airport will now have modern building, promotes energy efficiency, renewable energy, and in fact recycling can also be done in this airport as well. So the first important advantage is we have new airport in Arunachal Pradesh, and it happens to have all weather day operations. Whenever there is development of an airport, what would happen? This will lead to increased activities in that particular area. This will also lead to development of industrial region as well. This means it will have a multiplier economic impact in that particular area. So the economy as a whole in that part will get a boost. Third is in terms of the employment generation. So whenever there is an airport, you need people to operate it. This will also create employment. And finally, since it becomes an industrial active area, this will also give rise to tourism in that part as well. These are some of the significant aspects with respect to the development. Along with it, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also dedicated 600 megawatts Kamen hydropower project in the northeastern states, West Kamen districts to the nation. With this particular hydropower project, Arunachal Pradesh will have a power surplus, and it will also benefit the national grid in terms of stability as well as integration. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Pratham gets Indira Gandhi Prize for its work in education. This article here is speaking about Indira Gandhi Prize for Peace, Disarmament and Development. The Indira Gandhi Prize, alternatively known as Indira Gandhi Peace Prize or Indira Gandhi Prize for Peace, Disarmament and Development, is a prestigious award given by Indira Gandhi Memorial Trust. The prize carries a cash award of 2.5 million rupees and a citation. The Indira Gandhi Prize is awarded to individuals as well as organizations. This can be very important that it is given both to the individuals as well as the organizations to honor their efforts in promoting international peace, development and a new international economic order. Additional endeavors include scientific discoveries used for the benefit of humanity, enlarging the scope of freedom. In order to eligible for the award, a written work must be published. The panel constituted by Indira Gandhi Memorial Trust consists of national and international personalities, and the recipients are chosen from a pool of national and international nominees. For the year 2021, what we have is this award given to Pratham. Pratham happens to be one of the NGO which is working in the field of education. They are able to provide quality education for the children across the length and breadth of the country, and they provided education especially during the pandemic. What they were able to deliver is education making use of the technology when there was closure of schools during the pandemic. So what it has been able to do is it has able to bring new thinking to the pedagogy and is also improved the learning outcomes as well. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says center scraps export tax on iron ore and steel. Indian government had imposed about 15% export tax on many steel intermediaries. Why? That is because the center was made to increase the taxes on these metals due to the rising rates, and now India has scrapped the export taxes on low grade iron ore and some intermediate steel products beginning from Saturday after months of complaints from miners, steel makers about the loss of the foreign sale opportunities. According to the notification, government removes 15% export duty on intermediate steel products such as bars and rods. India exports of steel in the 7 months to October shrank to less than half the amount it had shipped in the earlier period. So now they have scrapped this taxes that they had imposed on iron as well as steel. This move could give a major relief to the steel industry. Now they will be able to expand as well, and at the same time it will motivate the steel industry and the iron industry to move forward, and this will also act as a booster to the economy. More on this will be discussed as part of our economy this week. So tune in to our economy this week. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about No Money for Terror conference. This has been explained as part of our big news initiative yesterday. Kindly look into it to understand what is this conference all about. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Discuss the impact of US midterm elections on foreign policy and the likely implications on India. Write a note on India's long-term low emission development strategy. Please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.